For legal reasons, this video is for entertainment purposes only. Hi everyone and welcome to the channel. In this video, I'll be replacing the front brake pads in this VS Commodore. Now, before we go any further, it's important to understand something. Brakes are incredibly important and you have to do them the right way. The consequences can be severe when done incorrectly. So with that safety warning out the way, let's get into it. So first things first, we have to jack the car up and get those front wheels off the ground. Before jacking up the car, make sure it's in park or in gear for manuals and that your handbrake's on. And we want to put something in the back wheels to stop the car from rolling as well. Okay, now that the car's been jacked up, we want to put an axle stand under there as well. We don't want to rely on just the jack to keep the car up. Okay, so I'm going to slowly lower the car so that it sits on the axle stand instead of the jack. Okay, now we have to lift the other side. Okay, now that the car's been jacked up, we can take off that wheel. Now we can focus our attention to the brake caliper. Now behind the brake caliper, we want to undo this bolt here. What will happen is we'll take it out and the whole caliper will slide up. Okay, so we want to undo this bolt here, but we'll also need to put a spanner on this nut because this bolt also will spin with this, so we need to prevent that from spinning as well. And the bolt's out. Okay, now that bolt's been removed, this whole caliper should move up when we pull on it. Just like that. Now to get the old brake pads out, all you have to do, just pull them out. Front's removed and the back. Okay, these have got to be the worst brake pads I've ever seen. There is nothing left on these. Okay, just for some context, this is a new one and this is the old one. Okay, now before we put the new pads in, we have to push the piston back into its place. So this is the piston here. This is what applies pressure to the pads, which in turn puts pressure on the brake disc and slows your car down. Now there's a few ways of doing it and I want to show you how I do it. Now before trying to push that piston back into its place, I highly recommend popping off the lid of your brake reservoir just to release some pressure. This will help make it easier to push the piston back in. But be warned, when doing so, keep an eye on the level because if you're not careful, it can overflow. Now to push that piston back in place, I'll be using this tool here that's specifically designed for it. What you want to do is open up the caliper, put the old brake pad in, just over it. And now we put this tool in, so the back side of this is touching the inside of the caliper, and this end here is touching the old brake pad. Now all you have to do is just tighten it back up, and doing so will push that piston back into its place. Now it's a bit hard to show on camera, but I'm also watching my brake reservoir to make sure that's not going to overflow. Okay, I can't tighten it anymore, which means that piston is all the way back, so now I can remove the old pad and this tool. Now you can see that piston is back where it should be. Okay, just a quick side note, this bolt here pulls out and this is our slide, right? The caliper slides on this. It's recommended that you re-grease these before putting the caliper back together. And it's the exact same process with this bolt here on the top of the caliper. Or if you push hard enough, the whole thing will come out as well. So I'll clean off all the old gunk and I'll reapply the good stuff. Now I can slide that back in. Now the top one. Okay, so now those slides have been greased up, we can put the new pads in. So just like how the old ones slid out, we now can slide these new ones in. Now remember, the slide with the surfers goes onto the brake disc. So now they're in, we can just close the caliper. Okay, now that caliper's back down, we can put that little bolt in the back again. But before we do that, it's recommended we put a little bit of Loctite on the threads so it doesn't come loose. Remember, these are our brakes. We don't want any chance of it coming loose. Now there's a little bit of thread locker on this bolt as is, so I'm just going to clean it with a wire brush and get it ready for the new stuff. Now this bolt can go straight back in its hole. Okay, now we're at the point where we can put the wheel back on. Okay, that's the first side done. Now we can begin this side. Just like before, it's the exact same process. Wheel comes off. The lower bolt behind the caliper comes out. Now this caliper pulls up. One of the pads already dropped out for me. Just like the other side, these were long overdue for a change. But before we put the new pads in, remember, we're going to lube up our slides. Just like last time, we have to push this piston back into place whilst keeping a close eye on the reservoir to make sure it doesn't overflow. Okay, that piston's all the way back. Now our nice new pads can go in. So that brake fluid has come up a little bit, but it didn't overflow, thankfully. Now would be the time to close it since we're not pushing the pistons back in anymore. Now this bolt gets a bit of a cleanup. Now our thread lock goes on. Now we tighten that bolt up. Now the wheel goes back on. Now we take the car off the jack stands. And with the power of editing, the car's down. Don't forget to properly tighten up your wheel nuts once the car's back on the ground. Now everything's back together, push the brake pedal. You may notice it feels a little bit soft. This is because you've pushed the pistons back. So just push the brake pedal a bunch of times until it feels normal again and you'll be good. This is so the pistons go into place with the new pads. Now before you say anything, I am aware those brake rotors were pretty bad, but I needed the pads more than anything else. Before you go and try anything, it's recommended to drive for at least 300 kilometers before any heavy braking. This is a process called bedding the brakes. And remember, your brakes are incredibly important, so make sure you do it the correct way. If you hurt yourself because you played with your brakes, I take no responsibility. That's on you. Now, with all that being said, I hope you enjoyed my video and learned something new. Please like and subscribe.